Majestic mountains covered in ice and snow. At the summit, amidst the howling cold wind, 3 tall figures traversed the treacherous terrain to reach the peak. Fiery aura. The 3 individuals appearing here at this moment were like 3 blazing fireballs. Even the frigid wind seemed to soften its harshness and relent its cruelty when it reached them. Your Highness, look over there, that's Norton Fortress. The 3 were dressed differently. The leading figure wore a pristine white fox fur cloak that remained spotless despite the arduous climb. His noble and extraordinary status was evident at first glance. Slightly behind him, the other 2, one clad in full battle armor, the other in a hooded black robe, one stern and solemn, the other serious and ruthless. It was the armored knight who spoke. From the mountain peak, their distant target was visible. Pointing toward the continuous steep mountain range in the distance and the only visible Grand Canyon in the center of the mountains, as well as the imposing fortress faintly visible on the other side of the canyon, the knight said gravely, the Ferens and Raymonds have been operating here for over 100 years. They've transformed the entire mountain range into an impregnable fortress. Even without considering casualties, it would be difficult for our army to scale it. To invade Raymond Duchy from here, we can only advance through the Mather corridor and break through Norton Fortress from the front. Gazing into the distance, observing, contemplating, and combining with the intelligence he had studied countless times, after a long while, the white-cloaked prince finally nodded slowly. With Norton Fortress ahead, Tennyson's stronghold and Grantham Fortress behind, plus old Job the Bear guarding the place, capturing Lundberg is indeed no simple task. No wonder General Stuart suggested borrowing passage through Dakota Province to break through from Baden Dutch's side. But as he spoke, a peculiar smile flickered at the corner of the prince's mouth. Without turning around, he asked, Norris, how is Black Eagle prepared? Responding promptly, the man in the black robe bowed slightly. By your Highness's command, we have been making full preparations for 3 years. Now Black Eagle branches have spread throughout all fortresses and towns in Lundberg. Additionally, we have established networks in Cheyenne Fortress, Bucal, and important cities in Nantes. At your Highness's command, Black Eagle can incite turmoil in Raymond Duchy at any moment. Black Eagle Bureau's operations had already infiltrated Raymond Duchy. And? 3 years ago. Commander Stuart's eyes narrowed sharply. If he remembered correctly, 3 years ago, Prince Gould had not yet become the 3rd Crown Prince, had not yet been granted the title of Duke Reynolds. More importantly, Prince Gould was only 17 years old back then. At that age, he had already established Black Eagle, had already begun planning such matters, had already harbored such ambition. Stuart, with Norris's full assistance, do you have confidence in capturing Lundberg? Prince Gould slowly withdrew his gaze from the distance. The 3rd Legion is willing to lay down our lives for your Highness. The armored knight's voice was more solemn than ever before. Good. Prince Gould finally turned around, a faint smile appearing on his rugged face. From today forward, Black Eagle Bureau will cooperate with your 3rd Legion in all aspects. However, I don't want you to capture Lundberg County at any cost. I want you to control the battle line between Tennyson and Norton Fortress, neither losing nor achieving a decisive victory, drawing as many Raymond troops here as possible. In 3 months, the Flaming Knight Order led by Silas will join your command. How to lure the Lionheart Knight Order of the Raymond Duke to Tennyson will be up to you, General. Drawing all Raymond forces here instead of launching a lightning strike deep into Raymond Duchy. A trace of doubt flashed in Stuart's eyes. You will understand everything when the time comes. The real war will officially begin 5 months from now. Prince Gould didn't elaborate further, merely gazing at the sky for a moment. The sky and his star-like eyes shimmered together with an indescribable brilliance. 5 months from now. May of year 858 of the imperial calendar. The age of calamity was finally coming. After 18 years of preparation, through his own efforts, from an obscure 17th prince to the 3rd Crown Prince of Norman Kingdom, commanding armies and possessing vast wealth, he was ready for everything. Though the age of calamity would bring disaster, it would also be the time of his true ascension. The torrential rain that had lasted for a full half-month finally ceased its deluge during the night. The next morning, contrary to the usual overcast skies, the long-absent crimson sun hung above the treetops. However, the cessation of the downpour didn't immediately make the flooding recede. Adjacent to the Agate River, most buildings in Deer Harbor were still submerged in floodwaters. Only castles and manors built on hillsides and elevated grounds remained unaffected. The Gaston Baron's manor was one of these exceptions. As a military noble with his own fiefdom, Baron Gaston, with his formidable strength as a mithril rank knight, had always been one of Deer Harbor's core figures. Even Viscount Warren, the Lord of Deer Harbor, respected him 3 parts and relied on him 7 parts. The Baron's residence in Deer Harbor was precisely what Viscount Warren had gifted him over a decade ago, when he received his title. Located adjacent to the Viscount's castle, it sat in the central area of Deer Harbor. Garnet, find Rowan, and have him notify the others. Have them report to the manor every evening to receive their daily rations. Also, tell them I've already sent Captain Brand back to Abledale. Their families will receive priority care. Tell them to settle their minds and focus on their tasks. After the floodwaters recede, they can return home in batches to visit their families. In the study of Baron Gaston's manor, a black-haired youth sat hunched in a chair, frowning slightly. Behind him stood a tall, long-legged girl with a ponytail. The youth's face was faintly pale, with slender hands and legs, appearing quite frail. But unlike his weak physique, his blue eyes were exceptionally bright and alert. The girl, meanwhile, was robust and efficient, leather armor, a slender sword, and the thick calluses on her palms all indicated specialized sword training. Young master, Captain Brand has already been sent back to the town by you. I must stay by your side at all times to protect your safety. Garnet's face was solemn as she spoke. The city guard is already maintaining order outside. Moreover, being adjacent to the Viscount's castle, even if chaos erupts, it won't reach this area. The black-haired youth shook his head with a smile, the wrinkles between his brows relaxing somewhat. Rowan and the other 8 are crucial to my first attempt. Though this flood has disrupted everything, it might also be an opportunity. Finding trustworthy replacements for them on short notice won't be easy. Go. Your young master doesn't want to truly fulfill those people's mocking whispers about becoming a ricebug living off others. Ricebug? Garnet naturally understood what her young master meant by this self-deprecating remark. Raymond Duchy was one of the 3 major duchies of the Ferren Kingdom, alongside Baden Duchy and Telnisiwa, forming the first line of defense against Norman invasions. Frequent wars had naturally influenced the duchy's customs, especially among the nobility. The nobles of the duchy valued martial prowess. Noble children rarely didn't practice swordsmanship. As the first heir to Baron Gaston's title, under normal circumstances, young Master Seth should have begun practicing swordsmanship long ago, perhaps even the Baron's secret techniques. But Garnet's heart darkened briefly. Perhaps due to congenital reasons, young Master Seth had been physically weak since childhood. Even slight exertion would quickly leave him completely exhausted. Forget practicing swordsmanship, he couldn't even participate in moderately strenuous activities. Moreover, young Master Seth had an unusually large appetite since birth, eating far more than ordinary people, almost matching the strongest warriors in the Baron's Night Corps. Because of this, in Deer Harbor's noble circles, many privately referred to young Master Seth as a ricebug, even believing he was unqualified to inherit the Baron's title. Young Master, you will succeed. You cannot wield a sword, so I will be your sword. Garnet silently murmured to herself. As young Master Seth's personal maid and most trusted person, she understood him better than even Baron Gaston and Lady Gaston. He couldn't practice swordsmanship, couldn't become a warrior, much less a knight. But young Master had never given up. He had never surrendered to reality to become a ricebug. To understand the cause of his physical weakness, the medical books young Master had read would stack higher than a person if piled together. Young Master had also studied literature extensively, self-taught mathematics, covered various miscellaneous studies, and even paid attention to secret techniques. Though Garnet's sword training was guided by Captain Brand, her physical conditioning methods and secret sword techniques came from young Master Seth, specifically selected by him from the Baron's collection for her. When others practiced swords, young Master was reading. When others rested, young Master was reading. When others enjoyed leisure and pleasure, young master was still reading and thinking. In Garnet's eyes, except for lacking martial prowess, young master was more learned and farsighted than anyone, even more so than Baron Gaston. As for young master's only weakness in martial ability, she would be his sword, doing everything possible to compensate for this deficiency. Rowan and the others are young master's first arrangement after leaving the Baron's domain. Under the premise of young master's safety, it's best to keep their loyalty. After a moment's contemplation, Garnet collected her racing thoughts, though her pretty face still showed concern. Young master, I'll go and return quickly. During this time, please don't go out alone. After the flood, chaos is everywhere in the city. Though the city guard maintains order outside, there are always overlooked areas. Seth was poorly mobile. For errands, he always relied on Garnet. If Seth had to go out himself, he might not even find Rowan and the others' lodgings. Go. Seth smiled helplessly, gesturing to a book on the table he hadn't finished reading. With a book in hand, he could remain calm even sitting idle all day. Understanding, Garnet bowed and exited, closing the door behind her. The study returned to silence. Chaos in the duchy is unavoidable. I just wonder how the situation in Lundberg will be. If Lundberg has also been hit by this great flood. Setting aside the book, Seth closed his eyes with furrowed brows, sinking back into the chair, deep in thought. After a long while, he sighed. The war between the duchy and the Normans had lasted nearly half a year. All counties of the duchy had been in turmoil, not just from Norman spies causing trouble, but especially from soaring prices of various supplies, particularly food, which had put the entire duchy on edge. Of all concerns, food comes first. If even the lowest quality black bread became unavailable, the duchy would descend into chaos long before the Normans arrived. Without a doubt, this great flood would exacerbate everything. Seth could already foresee the coming riots of those with empty stomachs, which would inevitably affect the Lundberg front line. Regarding the war situation, Seth had already adopted a pessimistic attitude. He was powerless to prevent the coming chaos. He lacked the ability to persuade nobles and wealthy merchants to share food, lower prices, and help peasants and the poor survive. Just like himself, he had long ago stockpiled large amounts of supplies, with even more stored in Abledale, but he didn't dare arbitrarily lower food prices, nor could he suppress them. However, though chaos was unavoidable, with the fully armed city guard present, Deer Harbor itself wouldn't immediately descend into complete disorder. The first wave of chaos would likely hit villages and small towns. Precisely foreseeing this, as soon as the rain stopped, Seth had immediately sent Brand and the others back to Abledale. The Baron had led troops to reinforce Lundberg months ago, leaving only militia forces to defend Abledale. As former members of the Baron's Night Corps who had followed the Baron to achieve remarkable military exploits, even though retired, Brand and the others were still elite. With their return, Lady Dana, Seth's mother, would have sufficient options whether to hold the territory or retreat to Deer Harbor. Chaos is also an opportunity. I can accelerate the establishment of my intelligence network. Not dwelling too long on pessimism, Seth was powerless to change the grand situation, but he could speed up the realization of his original plans. He had sufficient food supplies, plus those people he had brought from the town and already arranged outside. With proper handling, he was confident he could use this wave of chaos to truly expand his intelligence network. If every noble, every wealthy merchant, every underground power, their every move is under my watch. Even without the strength to kill a chicken, I can still manipulate their fates. Starting from the bottom, gradually infiltrating every corner of Deer Harbor, then continuing outward. Everything begins right here, right now. As Seth contemplated, time slowly passed. Suddenly, a light footstep sounded outside the door, followed by a knock. "Young master, your breakfast." A girl's voice. Seth had an unusually large appetite, requiring 2 breakfasts daily to avoid hunger. "Come in." Opening his eyes, flipping open his book, Seth assumed a reading posture. Then, a 20-something maid entered, bringing Seth a large cup of milk and 2 large slices of bread. The milk was steaming hot, clearly freshly warmed. Seth picked up the cup, blew on it, and took a small sip. A bitter taste. And it seemed familiar, somewhere before, he had tasted this bitterness. It was. In the depths of his eyes, his pupils suddenly contracted, then returned to normal. His face showed slight displeasure as he glanced at the maid. "Mary, why does today's milk taste somewhat bitter? Did you forget to add sugar?" The maid was visibly nervous. When Seth spoke, her expression changed immediately, showing panic. Only after hearing the second half did she manage to suppress her agitation, bowing her head as she hastily replied, "I probably didn't add enough. The milk is from storage, it's not very fresh." Indeed, having milk at all is fortunate these days. Seth's expression remained unchanged as his gaze returned to his book. Casually, he instructed, "Have Old Funk prepare another slice of lamb chop." As he spoke, he took another small sip of hot milk, then put down the cup and picked up a slice of bread. "Yes, young master." Maid Mary stole a glance, then nervously exited the study. Behind her, Seth's gaze gradually darkened. Linear fruit, bitter taste, dried and ground into powder, appears white. Consumed in sufficient quantity, it causes physical weakness and leads to diarrhea and vomiting. Undetectable by silverware. Seth's eyes turned cold. To determine the cause of his physical weakness, he had read countless medical books, paying special attention to substances that could subtly weaken a person. The bitter taste in the milk seemed familiar because he had experienced it personally before. And the amount mixed into the milk was substantial enough that he could detect the bitterness. With such a quantity, given his constitution, if he truly finished this cup, was this meant to make him seriously ill? Moreover, diarrhea and vomiting, symptoms similar to epidemic diseases caused by floods. With slight manipulation, combining the two. Who is behind this? Methodically opening a drawer containing an iron canister, Seth poured most of the milk into it, then closed the drawer. Setting aside the milk, he picked up the bread again, his gaze returning to his book as if reading, while his mind raced rapidly. From Maid Mary's expression, she likely knew this milk was tainted. But why? Maid Mary had worked in the Baron's manor for several years, from an ordinary family in the city. Was she bribed with money? Or was she coerced under threat? Every event necessarily contains purpose. Find the key to this purpose, then follow the clues to uncover the mastermind behind the event. A book Seth had once read contained these words, spoken by his most admired philosopher, the great sage Brent Albert from the Ernest United City-State. Whether Mary was bribed or coerced isn't the key. The key is that the symptoms caused by linear fruit powder resemble epidemic disease, and the target is me. This is meant to be unnoticed, making people believe it was a natural illness. A cold light flashed in Seth's eyes. Though nobles mocked him as a rice bug, he rarely went out and hadn't made enemies. So the cause of this incident must be the title. Could it be you? A figure floated through Seth's mind. The Baron had one son and two daughters. Seth was the youngest and the first heir to the title. His eldest sister, Edith, had married Viscount Warren's second son, Evan Warren, years ago. They lived in the adjacent castle and had a 2-year-old daughter named Alicia. His second sister, Eleanor, was studying in McCarthy City of the Ernest United City-State, the hometown of the Bisley family, his maternal grandfather's family. Many books Seth read were brought to him by Eleanor. If it was truly about the title, the first possibility would likely be his eldest sister Edith. And the person behind her, Evan Warren. Viscount Warren had 3 sons, Andrew, the eldest, Evan, the second, and Ian, the youngest. Andrew, being several years older and with strong support from Matthew, commander of the Warren family's Ted Knight Order, was undoubtedly the first heir. Though Evan had married Edith and gained Baron Gaston's support, he still couldn't shake Andrew's position. So if he stepped back, abandoning the Viscount title and looking here instead. If Seth were gone, Edith would inevitably become the first heir to the Baron's title. Edith's gentle nature, or rather, her weakness, meant that regardless of whether she transferred the title to her husband, the Baron's domain would inevitably fall under Evan's control. Just as he reached this thought, Seth's heart suddenly skipped a beat. Still not right. Even if he were gone, even if Edith became the first heir, Evan would still be far from controlling the Baron's domain. His father, Baron Gaston, was in his prime. With the powerful physique of a mithril rank knight, his father could easily maintain military control for another 10 or 20 years. If Evan was eyeing the Baron's title, why target him so early? Had he overlooked something? Or had he unknowingly offended someone at some point? Seth frowned slightly. "Young master, your lamb chop is ready." At this moment, Maid Mary's voice sounded outside. Seth responded, and Mary entered, placing the lamb chop before Seth. Naturally, she didn't forget the cup of milk. Seeing that young Master Seth had apparently drunk most of it with his bread, Maid Mary finally breathed a sigh of relief. Seth waved for her to leave. Seth was 18. If a normal 18-year-old man's combat ability was 10, someone with 5 could be called trash. But Seth? He estimated his combat ability was only 2. 5 is trash, 2 can only be an insect. Therefore, even knowing the milk was tainted, he hadn't hastily confronted Maid Mary. If she panicked and turned desperate, he truly couldn't defeat this powerful opponent. Additionally, Seth hadn't planned to hastily alert the mastermind behind this incident. After Brant and others left, the strongest fighter in the Baron's manor, and the person Seth trusted most, was Garnet. Until Garnet returned, everything should continue as normal. Half an hour later, just as Seth was considering whether to pretend to have diarrhea and vomiting, Garnet returned home. Without giving details, he simply had her seal off the backyard where the study was located, forbidding anyone from entering freely, and instructed her not to disclose his condition to anyone. Time quickly reached evening. With the Baron's manor token, Rowan and the other 8 weren't stopped by the city guard and arrived at the manor smoothly. After their reports and records, Seth gave them additional instructions before sending them away, of course not forgetting the bread he had prepared earlier. During this great flood, bread was more practical than silver coins. Night deepened, darkness covering everything. In this boundless darkness, even the lights of the Baron's manor appeared especially dim. In the bedroom, after helping Seth into bed, Garnet finally couldn't suppress her suspicion. "Young master, has something happened? Should I arrange night watch?" The unusual ceiling of the backyard, the instruction not to disclose his condition to outsiders, and young master's special instructions to Rowan and the others all indicated that something must have happened today, likely while she was away from the manor. Though young master hadn't directly told her, he hadn't hidden it from her either. With 10 years of serving young master, Garnet felt she had the right to know. She needed to understand this matter to determine if advance arrangements were needed to ensure young master Seth's safety. "Sleep in the outer room tonight. No other watch is necessary." Seth nodded lightly, then lay down. Whoever was behind this had chosen to use linear fruit powder, clearly indicating they had reservations. Otherwise, using deadly poison would have been simpler. If they didn't want to use poison, they naturally wouldn't send assassins either. Still, as a precaution, Seth had arranged for Garnet to rest directly in the outer room. As for today's matter, I'll explain in detail tomorrow after Rowan and the others bring news. Telling you early might startle the snake before catching it. Garnet understood Seth, and Seth naturally knew his personal maid's temperament. If she knew early that someone had dared to drug him, Garnet couldn't possibly remain calm. In anger, she might draw her sword against Mary, a very real possibility. "All right." Garnet responded, hesitated briefly, then in the darkness, her fair face flushed as she stammered, "Young master, would you mind if I, sleep here? I mean, I can sleep on the floor." Seth, who had already closed his eyes preparing to sleep, opened them to gaze at the girl's indistinct face in the darkness. Silence. Even breathing sounds were clear. After a few breaths, Seth shook his head with a smile. "All right, come up." Garnet had accompanied him since childhood. Both Lady Gaston and he himself had long regarded her as family. It was only because of Seth's physical weakness and slower development compared to peers that he hadn't already taken Garnet as his concubine. As he spoke, Seth moved inward on the bed. Garnet, however, suddenly lost her usual efficiency, wanting to sit but feeling awkward. "Garnet?" Seeing this, Seth wasn't in a hurry to sleep. Supporting himself with his hands, he sat up, preparing to discuss something with Garnet. Suddenly, his expression stiffened. Beads of sweat densely formed on his forehead, rolling down in streams. Almost simultaneously, the world violently trembled. The bed, table, chairs, everything in the bedroom shook. No, it wasn't just things in the bedroom shaking. The entire house, the entire Baron's manor, the entire Deer Harbor, even the whole earth was trembling and shaking. Void maggot hatching. Current state, larval form.